Hello, I'm Lori Lane-Zucker, founder and CEO of Impact Entrepreneur, and welcome to our webinar, Driving Opportunity Through Impact Investing in the Creative Economy. And a special welcome to all those members of the Impact Entrepreneur Network attending this webinar. Impact Entrepreneur is a large global network of systems-minded changemakers, entrepreneurs, investors, scholars, and students of social and environmental innovation who believe that this work needs to be done within a transformational framework. We build companies, we invest in them, we study and teach about them. But we also understand that we have to collaborate to build a new business paradigm and ecosystem that functions with a very different brain chemistry around those businesses, what we might call an impact economy, in order to find an authentically sustainable and equitable way forward. So if you agree with this perspective, are not yet a member, join the network. It is free. The only entry fee is your commitment to the business of change. This webinar is part of two series that we do, that we offer to network members and others. The first, of which this webinar is a part, is called Building an Impact Economy, and it's generally composed of topical panel discussions. The second is called Luminarius, and its theme is Fireside Chats. Our seasons run from September through July, and select programs can be found on our YouTube channel, Impact Entrepreneur TV. And be aware, you can become a premium member of Impact Entrepreneur and get access to the entire archive of now 75 past webinars, which represent certainly one of the deeper dives into the world of impact that you can find. All information on all of this can be found on our website, which is www.impactalchemist.com. Okay, now allow me to briefly introduce our program and our guest moderator to you. Creative economy. It doesn't get as much recognition in the impact space as it should, given its impact. The Policy Circle estimates that globally, the creative economy contributes 6.1% to the entire global GDP, generating annual revenues of $2.25 trillion and accounting for 30 million jobs. And as discussed in the description for this program that we designed with our co-producers, Upstart Collab, in the US, up to 35% of woman-owned businesses and approximately 38% of BIPOC-owned businesses are in the creative economy. Yet, in its 2020 annual survey, the Global Impact Investing Network reported that arts and culture received less than 0.1% of the global allocations of the investors surveyed. 0.1%. So there's obviously a major disconnect here. And well, it is in part because of that disconnect that we have worked with Upstart Collab on a set of programs for our webinar series that have spotlighted the creative economy, impact investing, and entrepreneurship. I'm putting here in the chat links to our previous ones that we've done with Laura and her team. Now, as someone who was an English major in college, who went to film school as part of my graduate studies and worked in the film industry for a couple of years early in my career, as someone who has spent a large portion of my career in magazine and book publishing around sustainability themes, and as someone who has been involved with quite a few other creative projects, I feel very close to that quirky subset of culture we call the creatives. And so for as long as Impact Entrepreneur exists, we will continue to meet regularly at this corner, this intersection of business and finance and the realm called the creative economy. And indeed, in our new online magazine we'll be launching very soon, we have selected creative economy as one of the magazine's principal issue areas. So we are delighted to be able once again to partner with the organization that is leading the way in this area. And in this, the third of our co-produced series, we welcome back Laura Callanan, the CEO of Upstart Collab, to be our moderator again, and to explore how impact investing in the creative economy is driving opportunities for communities in need and for the economy as a whole. And now let me briefly introduce our guest moderator to you. Laura Callanan is founding partner of Upstart Collab, disrupting how creativity is funded by connecting impact investing to the creative economy. Laura was Senior Deputy Chair of the National Endowment for the Arts, leading grant-making, operations, and research before launching Upstart CoLab. She was a consultant with McKinsey & Company's Social Sector Office and Associate Director of the Rockefeller Foundation, where in addition to responsibilities managing the endowment, she co-led impact investing, including investments in the creative economy with Smithsonian Folkways Records and Netomat. Laura has been visiting fellow at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, scholar in residence at UC Berkeley, visiting scholar at the American Academy in Rome, and recipient of a Rockefeller Foundation Bellagio Fellowship. Laura, welcome, and it's all yours to push forward.
Lori, thank you so much, and thanks for all of your encouragement and support and energy around connecting impact investing to the creative economy. We really, really appreciate it. Upstart believes that creative people solve problems, and on the conversation today, you're going to hear from 3 creative people who are solving a range of problems, from opportunities around quality jobs, vibrant communities, representation, creativity and free expression, economic opportunity. It's a whole range of things that the creative economy can drive, where the impact can land. And that's why impact investors can access the creative economy, can embrace the creative economy as a new focus area for impact investing going forward. And we're excited to be working with impact investors to make that possible. My organization, Upstart CoLab, is a nonprofit, and we're really focused on building this field of impact investing in the creative economy. The 3 companies that you will hear about today, Pasco, Prima Donna, and Arternal, are just 3 examples in a proprietary pipeline of funds and companies that Upstart has been tracking. In aggregate, these 230 impact investment opportunities are seeking $2 billion of capital over the next 24 months. These are opportunities across all of the creative industries, from fashion to film and TV, video games, food, the fine arts space, health and beauty. All of the industries of the creative economy are places where you will find socially oriented entrepreneurs. And so they're looking for the values aligned capital that will allow them to grow their companies. As Lori started to describe, the creative economy is significant. It's 5% of US GDP. It's more than $920 billion in the United States alone. This is a ripe area for impact investors to look for opportunities. So what I'd like to do is just jump right in and let our panelists introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their backgrounds, their origin stories, and what led them to launch the companies that they're leading today. And Patrick, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? I know you're often a little modest about your background in the fashion world, but tell us about yourself and what brought you to launch your own fashion brand. What is it now, 5, 6, 7 years ago when you launched Pasco?
6 years. 6 years. It's gone by pretty quick. But so I'm, and thank you for having me today, because it's a great honor, of course. I have been in the fashion space for like the last 35 years, let's call it. And that has been, I was the guy that you called if your company was in trouble. And I got sort of pigeoned into that place in my early 20s when I was hired by Giorgio Armani to fix one of his brands. And then I basically did that out throughout my career, all the way up to Gap and Perry Ellis, Anne Klein, Paco Rabanne, and a few others I forget now. I saw something throughout all that period as I got older that I needed to work on. And I think we've all seen it, right? We've all seen, in the companies I've worked for, we've seen the offshoring that's happened in the United States. And we've seen, the skilled labor, just these people fall through the cracks as we, as Americans, buy more and more products cheaper and cheaper overseas and in different places around the world. I saw this enormous opportunity to make our lives better, to make our communities better, to make ourselves better. And that is what was birthed out of that was Pasco Community Made. Community Made was built in the the worst part of COVID. You know, that period allowed me to see even more that we had an opportunity to onshore the work that making clothes and onshore and put people back to work. And so what we're doing very quickly is we're going into communities, rural communities, urban communities, and putting people back to work and letting them self-manage themselves, using technology in the right way so people can self-manage themselves and make a living wage.
That's great, Patrick. And we'll come back and hear a little bit more about the environmental side of your work, as well as the community focused part of what you're doing at Pasco. Pri, your background's a little bit different. You mix technology, you mix political organizing. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to launch Prima Donna. Now, is that 5 years ago? We met about 5 years ago. So when did you start with Prima Donna?
You know, I actually think the origins go back to almost when I was a teenager. I think you make sense sometimes of your story looking backward as you connect the dots, but it's definitely been about a 5 to 7 year journey. But first of all, thank you for having me. And it was amazing to hear about Patrick's experience as well, bringing his company to life. You know, my background is diverse. I started my career out after college in politics and progressive campaigns. I was someone, I like to think I was someone that was always really inspired by someone's vision of the future. I was inspired by change makers. And so for the first couple of years during and after college, I worked for a number of political campaigns and progressive candidates all across the United States. I got out the vote. I did a lot of political organizing. I did a lot of major dollar and grassroots fundraising. And those experiences were in some ways really great mini startups. You know, the nice thing about political campaigns is oftentimes there's a start date and then there's an end date. And you sometimes know what happens after that. But it taught me a lot about failure. It taught me a lot about grit. And I was really good at community organizing, especially with volunteers and with young people in different underserved constituencies. And I used a lot of that experience. So it was a very generous experience for kind of my next stage of my career. I got my MBA at the University of Chicago to really round out, I think, what I was lacking a little bit on the quant side. And then I ended up working in early stage connected hardware. So my stint in politics had landed me in Silicon Valley. I was working for a politician and you know, I did a lot of major dollar fundraising and really got introduced to a number of different types of startups. And so between my first and second year of business school, I ended up working at a very early stage LED lighting and control startup. And for those of you on the call, it may seem like Pri was working in politics, got her MBA, and now she's selling lights. But what I saw in LED lighting and building automation was extremely fascinating. We were really going from analog to digital, right? And you know, it really was energy efficiency. It really was clean tech. And I was one of the first 10 employees, and we manufactured actually in the United States and also had an overseas strategy for manufacturing and production. And as one of the first 10 employees, I got to really see everything. You know, I supported our CEO, I headed business development, some of our sales ops. And around that time, I really started to see, you know, this shift in analog to digital in other industries. And I started to see these LED lights or these LED dryers hit the market in the nail care space. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. If you go to Walgreens or Rite Aid or Target, you'll see kind of these kits, and it's these LED dryers, and they're meant to cure your fingernail. And I like to say it was the aha moment. It was like the LED light that went off in my head. And I said, I'm going to build NailBot. I'm going to decorate nails using your smartphone, really going from analog to digital in really the beauty industry. But my vision was really actually about power and creative expression, because I viewed nail as that one early vehicle for creative expression, really targeting in some ways an underserved demographic. And that was preteen and teen girls. I was a gender studies minor in college. And so this was really one of my passions. So I like to say, Laura, that I kind of connected, you know, my connected hardware backgrounds, my past in community organizing, my passion for gender equity, to kind of make Prima Donna and the NailBot come to life. And I'm happy to share more about that later on.
That's fantastic. So Sean, you're another example. You know, all of our entrepreneurs today, it's not you're not talking about something that you just started yesterday. You talk a lot about how Arternal, the company that you're leading today, grew out of a couple of prior efforts that you're honing and you're driving towards a solution for galleries and dealers in the fine arts space. But your origin story is especially interesting because you started to solve a problem for a friend, right? That's what got you into this whole space. So tell us a bit about your background and the origin story for Arternal.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Laura and Lori, and great to hear the stories of my co-panelists, Pri and Patrick. I grew up, or I was born in the island of Jamaica. I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and in Toronto, after finishing my schooling, I began in software engineering, completed my degree in computer science. I was 2 failed startups in. Typical founder journey. And I was like, do I go out there and get a job, or do I continue, my path as an entrepreneur? And as I was trying to make this decision, ran into one of my friends who was like, I'm quitting my job to become an artist full time. And I was just like, okay, yeah, people quit their jobs. But when she said become an artist full time, I was like, are you sure about this? I don't even know what that means. And so I wanted to dig in. I'm like, can I come to your studio? And she was just like, yeah. And it was kind of a throwaway sentence. But then when she said, yeah, I was like, oh, you're really serious. And so I show up in her studio and it was all of small by small square feet. And I was just like, how are you going to sell these works that are on the walls here? And she was just like, well, I'm going to reach out to my friends. I'm like, you need some more scale than that because it's going to be a numbers game. And I was like, can I come back here with my entrepreneurial hat on? And that's when I knew I was going down the rabbit hole to begin with for my 3rd startup, which is what this is. And I show up there and I'm asking her a bunch of questions and I'm like, you need tools. And I'm like, what exists? She's like, well, I only have access to Twitter. And back in 2012, Instagram wasn't what it is today. And today it's the de facto creative, focused app to sell. And I was like, I want to build a way for people to find studios. And so I asked her for intros to artists, and then I go down, like I'm very maniacal with who I got to serve. So I was like, let me just meet and connect with artists and go to every major studio that I can find. And we decided to build, this Instagram meets Yelp for artists and artist studios and helping collectors find the studios. We hit a bit of a roadblock in 2013, about a year later than that, where we realized like the artist's income is like a roller coaster and they don't know sometimes whether it's coming or going, and we can build a sustainable business off the back of that. So then that was our first pivot from My City Muse, which is what that was called, to Art Local. And Art Local, the focus there was, first I had to wonder where the money, or the money flow was. And people were like, hey, collectors got money. So we started to focus on the collectors, understand their needs, and built a product that was Instagram meets Yelp for collectors finding art galleries. And as we were going down that particular path, we drummed up about 10,000 users on the application. And we said to these galleries, hey, galleries, I think what we can do is help you actually drive people into your spaces. And they're like, well, we actually fly around the globe, right? And so, but I'm like, aren't you focused on foot traffic? And they're like, kind of. So after we had drummed up 10,000 people on this application called Art Local, and we were trying to sell it into them, they were beyond the door because they didn't have an understanding of how to discern who was coming into their physical spaces. So they just dropped that as a funnel altogether. So that's where, after being at the New Museum Incubator for a couple of years, we were just like, we need to pivot again. And we pivoted to Arternal. And today with Arternal, we service the industry's leading art dealers, auction houses, art fairs, et cetera. And we power them with best-in-class tools. The art world is not tech averse, but they are incredibly slow adopters. And so we want to provide best in class tools to be able to serve that market and give them access to data and new tools to help them drive more sales, which was their goals to begin with. But I can tell you more about that later.
Sean, that's great. That's great. So, we've got 3 very distinct industries represented on this call today, and impact investors might be able to understand the impact that you all are driving towards, but they may not feel like they're that knowledgeable or comfortable about the sectors that you're working in. So Patrick, could you talk a little bit about what you're doing differently at Pasco relative to the rest of the fashion industry, both on the environmental side as well as on the worker side. And Pasco is both it's a fashion brand, right? You make clothes, you sell clothes, I wear your clothes, but you also are doing something different. You started to describe community made to us, and that's got a bigger vision than just your Pasco branded clothes, right?
Yeah, Pasco, the business that we started Pasco 6 years ago, and it's grown rapidly as an e-commerce brand. It makes insanely comfortable clothes that I love, you love. We got to a point though that, and really, if you look back last year during the worst of COVID, and companies across America felt this, and especially emerging fashion companies that are e-commerce based, but everyone, there was a global supply problem. People could not get things. Your global supply broke down. So that was one problem. The other problem was here at home, that it really lifted the blanket on what you were seeing of skilled workers across America that are just being left behind. There literally is no work for them. And if you look at fashion, 2% of the fashion we wear in America is made actually in America. It used to be much bigger just 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And we saw this enormous opportunity because honestly, it broke my heart. And like if you looked at what was going on with people and skilled workers not being able to pay their bills, live a decent life, it just broke my heart. And with all the reason I think you bring up my past, with all the experience I had, I couldn't just sit there and not do something about it. So we built a business that it's truly a platform that we've set now Pasco on top of, and we plan to set other businesses on. But what it really boils down to, who really is the key benefactors of this, is our community of makers. And those are seamstresses, tailors, pattern makers, craftspeople. An example is Gee's Bend, Alabama, where we presently are, a rural, remote Black community of quilters. And we've gone there and we've created dignified jobs that pay a living wage. And that these makers now make all the products for Pasco. And soon they'll be making for other brands also. And we're scaling that, replicating that, whatever words you want to use, across America. We're also in New York City doing that. And it's just this idea that like the food movement, a simple way of looking at it, all of us a few years ago started really caring about where our food came from. It was that farm to table movement. This is the same thing, caring about where your products come from, because it's the community. We call it community made because you should think of it as your community. You should think of these people who don't want your help. They just want a fair shake. And we're supplying that through this model. And we're competitive. We're very competitive for emerging brands and for Pasco to have a great margin, to have a great business and do all the right things. But you actually have this other benefit, which is you know where your products came from. You can look at the person who made your pair of pants. I think that's important. And we're seeing customers become passionate about it because the best way to say it is they love that what their purchases make a difference.
So Pri, Patrick has come up with something with Pasco where it started, with community made. It started with his fashion line, but other things can be made in that same very maker focused, very community oriented way. Other lines of clothes, home goods, other things. So there's one current activity, but it's opening up a whole new way of working. And you're thinking in a similar fashion, I would say, with Prima Donna, because you've got your first product, the nail bot, which you should tell us about. But this is just the beginning of a much bigger vision you have for a community of prima donnas. Can you talk to us a little bit about the nail bot itself, but also the bigger vision for what you're trying to build in terms of this prima donna community?
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, your story is extremely inspiring. And I think there are a lot of synergies as well. Our vision for Prima Donna is to really power creative expression, and we do it through fun, interactive hardware and software experiences. But the magic is that our community of what we call prima donnas really powering those experiences. And so Nailbot is that first vehicle. It's our first flagship product. It prints custom instant art directly on your nails in about 5 seconds. We print in one pass. And the way that it works is that you use your mobile phone, whether it's iOS or Android, and you pair wirelessly to our Nailbot. I've got a Nailbot behind me. You put your finger inside the finger cradle and you tap print. And in about 5 seconds, that instant custom art is on your nail. You can design your own art. Our vision is for you to sell and share that art with your networks. And our most engaged users are fundamentally Gen Z young women. It's really preteen and teen girls or teen young women. 92% of all preteen and teen girls in the United States decorate their nails regularly. And 14% of all preteen and teen girls in the US decorate their nails at least once a day. So that's really our target engaged community of what we consider our highest, most engaged creators and makers. And so I view nail as the gateway to the body at Prima Donna. And so while we're starting with, our trademarked and patented Nailbot systems, our vision is actually to extend into other maker categories like tattoo and henna and craft, with that vision to eventually decorate the entire body. So I think my training in connected hardware that I shared earlier really taught me that you can have diversified revenue streams if you have, if you really leverage low cost, high performing printing and robotic systems. And so we look at replacement consumables, accessories, the platform, that art marketplace platform. But fundamentally, it's our users that are creating and sharing and selling their creations that make Prima Donna what we believe it can be.
And what's so exciting is, you always talk about for the prima donnas who are intrigued by the tech, there's a way for them to get under the hood. For the prima donnas who are feeling entrepreneurial, this is sort of a micro business opportunity for them effectively to sell swipes on the Nailbot to their community. For the creators, this is a chance to design art that fits on your fingernail. So the creativity and free expression part of it, the entrepreneurial bit, the entryway into exploring technology, there's a lot more going on, right?
Yeah, I think so, to your point. So nail as a category, it's a $15 billion category, and it's a very playful, artistic, fun category that we at Prima Donna, how we approach it, I think to your original question, how are we different than maybe the existing players in this space? Yes, on the community side, which I'll get into, but fundamentally at its core, we view nail as in some ways closer to arts and crafts and creative expression than some of the existing incumbents or even in the competitive landscape. And because of that, it is a very multi-generational category. You do have a very heavy preteen, teen audience that does shape behavior and high usage, but you see everyone in the house, across genders even, really using nail products. And especially with our core engaged audience, we view Nailbot in some ways as a very clever gateway to STEM and STEAM. Our users can learn digital design, whether it's through Procreate, whether it's through Adobe's Creative Suite or our own software, as to how to design awesome art, whether it's used with the Nailbot or elsewhere. If they want to learn how the Nailbot was made, we actually released a number of what we considered hacker kits, where girls programmed their own mini inkjet printer. It was one of my first prototypes that we built. So they used an Arduino Uno, and they really learned some coding skills, and we partner with a number of nonprofits along that. And if girls want to eventually sell the Nailbot and sell different parts of that experience, we're really offering that kind of creator incentive program.
That's fantastic.
So whether you're an artist, however you decide to create, whether it's through art, whether it's through coding, whether it's through hacking or making or selling, we think there's an avenue for you at Prima Donna for that.
That's amazing. So Sean, you're trying to take on a massive global industry that is historically very private, not necessarily very tech savvy, and you're trying to help them really transform as businesses. You started with CRM, you've moved on to inventory management, and now you're tackling payment processing. Tell us a little bit about how Arternal is solving pain points for art dealers and art galleries, and why that is the right entry point for some of your bigger vision around transforming the experience of of artists and allowing them to own their own data and understand more about the best ways to manage their careers.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks. You know, when we, you know, as you mentioned, when we first got into the industry, we were trying to figure out a way of how do you help them, the dealer, accomplish their goals? Because if the dealer is not building a successful business or maintaining their business, then the artist suffers, right? In general, especially at this level. And any artist who's in any program is trying to matriculate upstream to show it at dealers. So our focus was, how do we put these dealers in position to win? And most of these, you know, art galleries and their staff were focusing on memory, which is incredibly fallible, as we all know, and Excel spreadsheets, pen and paper. And the only piece of tech that they had was inventory management. And we had asked them, you know, well, where's your CRM? And client relationship management is something that most of them did not know it existed or how to leverage the tool. And nobody had built something. And we're like, how does this not exist here? And so we took that upon ourselves to build industry leading tools in the space and start with the CRM. And we had to educate and sell, which is not the easiest. But we were able to burrow our way into the industry and drive adoption to a point where then the next step for us was, as you mentioned, inventory management. It was a pretty stale offering, you know, 2016, 2017, 2018. Even today, a lot of players still use old school inventory management systems. And our take was like, automation helps get these people out of, you know, focusing on sitting at their desk, and then communicating with their clients. And so we build best in class inventory management in this fully vertical offering that connects to their CRM with an expansive tool, you know, bringing Salesforce like or HubSpot like tools to these, you know, art-minded people to help them do business. So our focus was, let the technology handle the business part that they don't have such an affinity towards, and let them do what they do, which is engaging, building relationships. And the financial or business aspect, which affects both artists, you know, and dealers, they don't really have a proper grasp on that. And so again, you know, our premise is, you know, let's have the tech handle the biz stuff. And when we look at, you know, cash flows in these galleries, it's always a struggle. And, you know, collecting payments, always a struggle. And when you look at who are the main payment processors that exist in the art world, it is the major banks. Why would somebody say that? It's because 80% of their transactions are processed via bank wire. So your leading payment processors are your Bank of Americas, your Wells Fargo's, your, you know, JP Morgan, Chase, right? And so for us, we're like, well, we can actually get into the middle here if we partner with a bank. And so we leverage some of our relationships in the Valley to be able to make an intro to a particular bank who's working with some of the top known names like Phoenix and Stripe and stuff like that, and have a direct partnership and investment. And so now we're going to be able to take over that layer and process and reconcile. One of the important things that's happening right now is regulation. And you know, KYC, which is know your client, anti-money laundering, these regulations are coming in and affecting these businesses, and they don't have the human resources to tackle this problem. And so we built that into our framework. So in our fully vertical tool, we allow you to mitigate your risk when it comes to regulation, process and reconcile your payments. And we get to do what nobody's done in the industry, which is like take a percentage in the middle for solving for this. When it comes to, you know, how this now affects the artist, we're like, let's go downstream and help people. Now that we've like leveraged, you know, some venture money and impact money to be able to put ourselves in position to win. Now it's like, let's go downstream and help these artists who are at the heart. Like dealers have a job because of the artist, right? It's a symbiotic relationship, but the artist typically gets the short end of the stick. And we want to empower artists who are not taught business. They're taught to just focus on the creative. How do we give them, you know, more business tools to do what they do so they have more leverage when they're interacting with these dealers? You know, as we all know, dealers take 50% of, you know, the money, which, yes, okay, they're doing a lot of the work, but the artist at the end of the day doesn't have access to their own contacts, can't like market and promote to their own contacts. And so empowering them. Also, like we know the rise in the Black, you know, artists these days and people collecting, you know, Black art. But, you know, there's relatively no Black dealers that exist in the space. So we want to be able to seek out and partner and work with these dealers and give them access to better tech at, you know, lower rates so that they can actually compete. And then alongside that, give artists who are working in their studios better tools so that they can own their own information and then be able to market and build their own personas, et cetera, in the space as they want to matriculate upstream. And data is incredibly key. And the artists nor the dealers don't have access to their own data. And we want to be able to put them in position to own that as well.
Patrick, given the fact that you've worked at some really, really big, well-known fashion brands, you have access to a whole range of potential investors in your company. And I remember coming to your office in Chinatown pre-COVID, and you were talking to some more traditional types of investors, VC types of investors. But the capital that you've welcomed into the company now really is values aligned with you and with Community Made. You've got investments from folks through Gratitude Railroad. Upstart has brought the Souls Grown Deep Foundation and an anonymous foundation to the company. I know you've gotten a PRI from another foundation recently. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important to you to have impact investors supporting the growth of Pasco? And what are you seeking now from investors? Because you're still raising capital for the company. And so for those who may be on this call, what are you looking for? You know, maybe there's someone who'd be interested to follow up later.
No. What we found was that that the best way to say it is we've shown people that we can do really good things and make lots of money, right? And those two are important to always keep in mind because we're finding, you know, impact investors, that's their key, that's what they're working towards, that's their focus. And so we've been able to tap into that. Gratitude Railroad is a perfect example. Amazing that the founders are investors. It's an amazing crew of people. But we've also been able to tap, because of that same, into foundations with PRIs because they see the return, they want that return, but they also see equally, or if not more importantly, the social return, which is that we're the job creation that they're seeing. Bend again, New York. It's the majority of the people are women, minorities that we're bringing into the fold and into the Community Made family. So they welcome that. But we're out there continuously talking to institutions and traditional institutions, and we sometimes get funny comments back and sort of deaf ears, right? That there's a belief, and I think it's the old belief. It's this old broken belief that all money should flow up into your shareholders. We don't actually believe that. We believe that you can have amazing returns and take care of your makers, take care of the people in the company, take care of the people. The reason we started this was not to leave people behind. And that balance, and when we find the investor who understands that balance, those are the people that we welcome wholeheartedly as investors into the company. But it's a whole new mindset. You know, we never not think about, and this is important, but we never not think about the business or the business model or how we're going to make money. We're for profit, but we also believe that we can pay people a living wage, a fair wage, everyone who works with us, and that we can do even more than that. We can create safe environments for them to work in, environments where it's closer to their community, where they don't have to commute 3 to 5 hours like some of our makers had to before. There's a lot that can do it. And when we find investors who believe those same things as us and want to put their money towards that, those are the people we want in the fold.
So talk a little bit, Patrick, about how you're expanding now. You're doing it by going into new communities, expanding geographically. Yeah. I think you're trying to focus on the South and the West. And sometimes you're finding regional, place-based funders and investors who really want to welcome you to their city or to their rural community. So how are you bringing growth capital into the company at this point? And talk a little bit about your expansion plans.
Yeah, so the expansion first, because totally ties into how we raise money at some points. We're looking at different cities and different communities. We really fall into looking at underserved communities because that's where we're finding our makers. Interestingly enough, though, we're also looking at Indian reservation, Native American reservations, and looking for one of those. Actually, tomorrow we're in the community having a conversation. Would we be welcome if we came? Funny enough, when we go into communities, and this is off subject real quick, when we go into communities, we get people who don't actually believe what we're saying. People have been, there's so little trust left when you talk about creating jobs, that even the foundations all the way down to the makers, we have to build trust there. So as we go into communities, a big help of going into communities is that we're finding impact investors who want to invest in a community, that want to join us because they want to put their money towards a community. We're finding foundations who want to do the same thing. Souls Grown Deep for Alabama, for G's Ben, was an investor in Pasco, and they really wanted to help us to help this community. So we're finding that as a great vehicle to have conversations with people, that we can actually show them that we're going to come to this place to do that. Our expansion plans is to do this across America. We're going to build a big platform, and it's going to be big because the bigger it is, the more people we can bring into the family. We can, more of these makers we can bring into the fold. But as we do that, I really, really love the idea of continuously having, when you have an impact investor or a foundation in an area, that's that first part of trust to the community that we need. It's completely helpful.
And all three of the entrepreneurs on the call today, you all are using technology. I mean, that's a big part of what you're building, and it's allowing you to imagine extreme scale. Talk a little bit, Patrick, about what you're building on the tech side that makes Community Made possible and how that's going to work, because that's part of the reason that you need growth finance, right? That organic growth,
100%.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's big, right? If you think about what we're building is an opportunity for these communities, these makers, to be able to use their phone to self-manage themselves. So to be able to see the work that is available for them for that day, that week, that month, it's continuous, to be paid for the work that they're doing, to be able to see, everything, to be able to see the community that's going to join them to make a product, to see where they should go, what times, everything can be on that, and they can self-manage themselves. So we're building that now. We're in the beta testing of that. And we're going to expand it so consumers can come onto it. And consumers, imagine buying a pair of pants from us. And this is in the near future. Buy a pair of pants, and you could connect as far as you want to. You could actually know the exact maker who made those pair of pants, or you might just want to come out a bit and just see the community that's benefiting from you purchasing this pant that you love. Or you could, come even further out and just use it as this wonderful vehicle that if you need something repaired on that pant, because we believe that, not having less and doing more with it is, we have a very strong sustainable footprint and conversation. But we would love that if something happened to that pant, needs to be repaired, this technology will connect you with the maker who made it. You'll be able to send it back to that maker, have it repaired and sent back. Imagine the joy that brings. So that's using technology to connect people, to bring happiness, to actually bring out the potential of the makers. So some of those, I think those are our three-legged stool, right? That connectionness, that happiness, and the potential of opportunity that you can create. And that's all just buying a consumer product. That's just buying something that you were going to buy already, but now it makes a difference.
Pri, you've been raising funds from a lot of investors who care about backing women entrepreneurs. Not only that, but you've really tapped into that movement around gender lens investing in a significant way, both through VC funds and through angel investors. Can you talk a little bit about who is a prima donna investor and what you're looking for in the capital that you're using to grow the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So to date, Prima Donna has raised about $5.6 million. It's come in different funding sources and having met different milestones. Our largest investors are seed funds. Jessie Draper with Halogen Ventures is on the board. She's led our largest rounds, along with Version 1 Ventures and Angela Tran and the Amazon Alexa Fund. We have a host of both male and female investors that are angels, but many of which have built their own product categories. Helen Greiner, she invented the Roomba. Some of you may have that. It's a robotic, it's the robotic vacuum cleaner, actually one of the most popular robotic applications in consumer history, along with a range of other entrepreneurs, Rebecca Minkoff, that really span robotics, hardware, beauty, fashion, and female investing, frankly. I think, Laura, what we've been able to tap into is, I believe our investors reflect the gender dynamics of our company and how the target customer that really loves the nail bot and identifies as a prima donna and frankly believes in the bigger vision for creative expression across nail, tattoo, henna, and these other maker categories. That's not to say that venture capitalists aren't interested in it. We just happen to have found predominantly female VCs that really, frankly, believe in me, the team, and the vision. And so I think the success of Prima Donna will come down to, we have a very strong understanding of the fundamental economics of our business. We are a Delaware C Corp. We do make money, but we also recognize the social impact and responsibility of the communities that we serve, right? And so if we are really impacting a preteen and teen young woman or man, then we have a responsibility to show them how the nail bot was made, to offer them abilities to give back and make money off of this art marketplace. And in terms of your point on the technology piece, we are a technology company. At its core, that's what Prima Donna is. But I believe we, in a very clever way, are building this stronger community-based brand around connected hardware. And that's the magic of using hardware as a moat. When you have diversified revenue streams and you have people powering the hardware that just make it better and better. So NailBot at its core and all the other printers and robotic applications we're building, they're meant to be low cost, high performing, intelligent automation, but it enables digital creativity. And when I started off talking about how I saw the shift from analog to digital in LED lighting, we're seeing the same thing in our creative categories, but our mission is to really enable the creators behind them to really monetize. So in terms of our overall fundraising strategy, I believe if we make milestones, we accelerate growth. We have a multi-billion dollar categories that we're targeting. We believe this can be a $1 billion company. And so our next growth stages are really about funding inventory, frankly, in creative ways, and getting the bots out. We are heads down in production right now. Our whole team is living together, so it's a very fun environment. We're here in Southern California at the moment. And yeah, I'd say the next 18 months for Prima Donna and NailBot are very exciting. You'll see bots out in the field in a very heavy 2022. And so if you're interested in—
That's exciting.
Yeah, I think even if you don't want to invest in Prima Donna, get someone in your life a NailBot. You'll be supporting the company. It's a really fun product.
So Sean, you closed a seed round earlier in the year, and a really interesting combination of investors came into that round. So you had some foundations doing program-related investments, and then you had some Silicon Valley VCs. So tell us a little bit about who's been backing the company and what's the profile of the type of investor you want to welcome into Arternal? Because you said to me recently that you're about to raise your next round sooner than expected. So tell us a little bit about the capital that you need to grow the company.
Yeah, definitely. So, in our seed, we had some, notable players, the Ford Foundation, from the impact side. It was great to have them on board, especially because, we want somebody at the table who understands the mission part of what we want to be able to do. And they're an incredible partner, as people know, and they're like, let's help you gear up to raise your A, because, for us, there's a lot of equitable sides to the art market, especially, me being a Black founder / CEO, in the art space. I used to feel like I'm like one of one in rooms, and I want to see, like, now it's growing a bit, but I want to see more of more Black and brown, in these spaces that I'm in. And so, there's a lot of things about like helping people understand the data and being able to show the data, because if you can't see it, you can't change it. And so, that just highlights a little bit of stuff that we want to do on that front, and also helping people understand that there are jobs. Like we've partnered with the AUC, which is the Atlanta University Center, so that we can get HBCU students, internships with Arternal, and then just widen the opportunity, because, it's not like this doesn't have talent here. It's how does this talent know that there's a market and that this market needs them, right? And so, these are some of the things that we want to work on that side. And then on the more traditional VC side, we have, Precursor Ventures, which is run by Charles Hudson, one of the, gentlemen who's really doing the work to have, founders of color and women, have that sort of representation from a VC on their cap table. Ben Horowitz, who is famed from the Andreessen Horowitz brand, and one of the partners there, he invested in our seed round, and now we're looking to with everything in and around payments that unlocks a crazier opportunity in the space. $60 billion worth of art is transacted on an annual basis. $2 trillion worth of art exists in private hands, and major market opportunity. And we see for the first time, our goal is to be the payment, process, facilitate payments and be the payment processor in the art world. And so we need some more capital, to be able to fulfill the rest of that mission. We're going after a 60 billion or a 1.2 billion opportunity. If we can, grab 2% of the transaction in the middle, we'd love to be able to go raise a pretty large or pretty significant Series A to be able to accomplish that. And so, we're going to be going out just after Labor Day, September 7th, to open up our Series A round, so that we can fulfill the rest of this mission.
That's fantastic. So Lori, hopefully there are some questions that have been stimulated by this fantastic conversation and all of the work that these great entrepreneurs are doing. Are there some questions from the audience that we should bring to the discussion now?
We have several in the queue. I'd urge others in the audience we still have time for you to compose questions. There's so much has passed over the transom here that I'm sure there are questions out there. So please do add them to the list. Please do upvote the questions that are on the Q&A queue that you'd like to hear the guests answer. Laura, before we get to the audience questions, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things about having you always as the guest moderator here is we don't really get to hear from this vast resource that you have, because you've spent most of your career working in this nexus of arts and finance and entrepreneurship. And I'm just wondering if you can give us kind of a bird's eye perspective on how you see that nexus evolved over the last 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, even before you started in Upstart CoLab. I'd be interested in hearing the reasons for why you started Upstart CoLab, because obviously something wasn't happening well enough then. So can you give us some perspective?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. I gave an interview to Tom Finkelpearl for a new book he has coming out about museums and the future of museums. And I had breakfast yesterday with one of my colleagues who was with me in this journey back in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was at the Rockefeller Foundation. And at the Rockefeller Foundation, we started the whole work on impact investing with something called Provenex, the Program Venture Experiment. And this was back when the Rockefeller Foundation worked in 4 key areas: working communities, which had to do with community development; health equity, which was very global in focus; food security, which was the updated effort related to the Green Revolution work that the Rockefeller Foundation is so well known for; and then what was called creativity and culture, the arts and culture activities of the foundation. And if you know the Rockefeller family, they were instrumental in the beginnings of of MoMA in New York, the Museum of Modern Art, very generous to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So art has been a big part of that family legacy, their philanthropy as well as their personal endeavors. And so it was not a surprise that in addition to early impact investments that the foundation made in agriculture and health and community development, along with my colleague Joan Shikagawa, we made 2 investments related to the creative economy. And then what happened is a new president came to the Rockefeller Foundation, who was responsible for the foundation's deep, deep commitment and investment in building the ecosystem around impact investing. Very important. And the impact investing space would not be where it is today if that investment by the foundation had not happened. Obviously, Rockefeller didn't do it alone. There was a whole long list of other foundations who participated, but they did quite a bit. At the same time that the foundation was backing impact investing, they stepped away from anything in the arts and culture space, and they eliminated the program area, creativity and culture. So I think that actually had a big influence on where we are today, and the fact that impact investing has grown and doubled down on community development, and we see things happening in the health space. And food and agriculture is a ginormous section of anybody's impact portfolio. But what the Global Impact Investing Network calls arts and culture, which I would challenge is not the right way to frame this opportunity, the creative economy, food and fashion and media and the fine art world and all of these industries that we're talking about on this call, I think that's the right way to frame the opportunity. It's been overlooked, it's been missed, because people in the creative sector haven't seen themselves in this impact investing conversation, which is a real shame, because America's museums and other endowed arts nonprofit organizations hold $58 billion in their endowments. And they have been really lagging behind foundations and universities and environmentally focused nonprofits and others when it comes to aligning their endowments with the values and mission. And I think without some of those large cultural leaders in the conversation, it's harder to encourage fund managers and wealth advisors and others to be paying attention to and investing in surfacing these sorts of great opportunities that we're hearing about today that are all in the creative economy. So that's a little bit about why I'm doing this work. I think it's really a matter of needing to connect the dots and invest a bit of time and energy around this topic. It's so rich, it's so robust, but we don't, art lovers, artists, cultural institutions, we don't have time to waste on this, because we're basically a generation behind in terms of where the rest of impact investing is today. So,
I'm glad I asked the question.
All right. Well, the long-winded answer, but hopefully.
In the meantime, our audience went crazy.
Okay, good. Better questions from the audience.
Get into it. And Margaret's received and co-tied for the most upvotes. So we'll start with Margaret, and then we'll move to Jessica. Patrick, can you share how fashion-based entrepreneurs can work with Pashco in North Carolina and other locations? We have 3 apparel companies in our 2021 Velocity Accelerator starting in August in North Carolina.
Yeah, what we're doing right now is we're looking to expand the platform into different communities. And as we do that, we'd love to hear, to have a conversation with these companies or these individuals, because we're looking for them now. So please reach out. We're pretty easy. Just go to our website, pasco.com, and talk to our customer service, and they will connect you to me or to someone else. But we're very, very easy to connect with them. We would love the opportunity.
Yeah, and Laura, as we discussed, you from here on out, you choose who you want to answer the questions. Jessica's asking, for someone that's just getting started, how would you recommend finding funding? How do you find those leads? I'm not in tech, so having trouble breaking in.
So I don't know from the person asking the question if they're an entrepreneur launching a creative business seeking impact capital. If they are, they can go to the homepage of the Upstart Collab website, and there's a banner across the top of the page that allows them to submit their term sheet, their pitch deck, information about their company and their cap raise to Upstart. If it qualifies and meets the criteria of what the investors we advise are looking for, we will follow up with them.
Great. Do any of the entrepreneurs here have suggestions? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I can just share a little bit of my story super briefly. So Jessica, what I would say is, my first early checks actually came from like my college roommate from, many years prior. I was in an accelerator called Hacks. So we lived in Shenzhen as we were really working on some of our early prototyping. I applied to a number of accelerators. And so in some ways that's very democratizing. You don't necessarily have to have those relationships. They're really looking at the merit of your pitch deck, your idea. If you've built an MVP, you don't sometimes need a lot of money to get customer feedback on prototyping. So I'd say just be very resourceful, even if you haven't raised any outside capital, to prove something, right? Build some version of your product, even if it's sketched out, and create a pitch deck around it and think about some very key questions about your consumer, about the capital that you'd raise and what it'd go towards and what those next milestones are. And then I think as you keep building, you can get introduced to more people. You're already on this call, so you're hearing how we raised our capital. But that's what I would suggest. Use your own network, be really resourceful to kind of build your first iteration of your product.
Thank you. The next question is directed towards Sean from Brian. Do you find that the art market has a lot of distrust between artists, galleries, institutions, and collectors? If so, how have you gained the trust of your partners to do something different than the norms of the industry?
It's a good cue. Trust is one of the major currencies in the art market. And for us, so to answer the first part of the question, there's distrust, amongst the different parties in certain aspects, and then there's a lot of trust in others, right? Like you trust your dealer to be able to sell work for you as an artist. Now, will they always pay you on time? That's another thing that you need to put your faith and trust into. From the ways how museums and collectors and dealers and artists work together, I think for the most part, they work together in a very, very, inefficient way. And that's part of the reason why we have a business and why we're building. And so our focus is to be able to streamline the ways how each of the parties connect, work, and engage with each other so that better business can happen. Because I believe the market could be, 2, 3, 4 times plus bigger than it currently is at 60 billion annually. Our focus was build great tools, right? Understand the person or the business that you're serving, which is what we did. Dive in with them, know what their pain points are, and then how do you build against their pain points? And for us, it was, people were saying, oh, you'd never get access to an art gallery's contact book. Like, that's impossible. I was just like, no, it's already been proven that this stuff can happen. You just have to buy their trust by helping them become 10 times more efficient. Because if you 10x somebody at what they're doing, you'll give them everything. It's why Google owns all of our data, because I open my phone, they're like, oh, you've got this meeting here. Oh, here's a quicker travel time to your destination. Because again, efficiency and 10xing somebody will put them in the position to reveal more. And so for us, that's what we're doing with the art world. And it's getting us into the place where, we're about to process the transaction on their behalf. And that's never been done. But again, it's the trust factor that we built. And I've also been in the industry almost a decade now. So that kind of helps as well.
Thank you. Let's move down the queue a little bit to a question about measurement. What indicators or frameworks are being used to monitor and measure social impact beyond financial returns?
Yeah, and I tried to frame that a bit at the beginning of our call today, because the folks on this webinar, on this call, we've got folks focused on quality jobs, we've got folks focused on representation, free expression, community building, whether it's a geographic community or a community of artists. So there are a lot of ways around access to opportunity, quality jobs that the folks on this call are driving impact through their companies. But there are also the unexpected opportunities for entrepreneurs who are creative and generous in their basic orientation, which is what I find with a lot of the folks working in the creative economy, there are these unexpected opportunities to deliver impact. And Patrick, I love the story of what you all were able to do when you took over a couple of buildings and set up shop in Gee's Bend in terms of bringing the internet to this rural community in Alabama, because this is not the kind of impact that an investor is likely to ask you in advance to talk about in your metrics or your impact report, but this is the kind of impact that can happen when creative people are solving problems. So could you just describe to us, what happened when you showed up in Gee's Bend and you couldn't get any bars on your phone?
Well, bringing up Google Maps, right? Driving there, finding my way there the first time, you basically drive into a zone where your phone just is useless. And what you find in these rural communities, and we've all heard it, right? But what you're finding is there's no internet, there's no slow internet, there's definitely not high speed internet, and cell service isn't there. So what we did was, everything to do as an impact investor, every time that you go into a community, and for us, walking into a community, and I think we all share this, you're building trust. You're constantly building trust. You're walking into a community that really doesn't believe that companies do good. And what we found, some of the things just break, as an entrepreneur, they break your heart. When I first went there to speak to the community, we did an outside conversation, and a teacher came up to me. I was like, how are you teaching kids? Like my son lives on Zoom for school. And she was like, we're passing out work and hoping the kids do it because their parents can't connect. And even if there was internet service here, it'd be too expensive to really have it on, but there's no. So what we did right away was we took over 2 buildings in the community. One is our warehouse and distribution, and one is our pod for the makers to make clothes in. We put 2 satellite dishes on and opened it up to the whole community. Opened up, gave the password out. Anyone can use it. We're putting benches and tables outside. You can come inside. You can just use that as your internet for free. It's also, it's the right thing to do. It's also, for us, it's more than just creating jobs. It's also becoming a part of the community where they trust us.
Pri, do you have any examples of impact that your company has generated that you might not have expected at the start, or that an investor might not have asked you to have a metric for that, but over the years, you've realized that this is something powerful that you're delivering in terms of impact?
Yeah, I'd say all of the magic of the Nailbot really is about the girls behind it. And I really think it's the number of preteen and teen girls that, wanted to fundamentally learn how the Nailbot was made, which is why we also released our maker kits. We sponsored Girl Scout Convention a couple of years ago, and the overwhelming response was, can we create a maker badge or patch out of the Nailbot? Right? Can we print digital cookies on our nail? Can we have a coding platform so that I can code my own nail art as well? And I think the types of community programs where we can, yes, we got to get out the bot, we've got to sell the bot, but where we can really craft programs around STEM and STEAM for our community has been something that we've really taken to heart over the past few years. So we are behind the scenes. We have a group of our ambassadors working on a code your own nail art platform, on a ambassador digital design platform, and on a hacker platform. And I think those are very, very clever impact vehicles that when we started the company, we just didn't know how well they'd be received. And the overwhelming reception really from kind of our preteen teen audience is that they want they want that kind of engagement with our product and with the platform. So that would be one example. And I'd say the other is, we've actually, and when you start to raise money, I see a lot of questions on raising capital. I would say, capital is there. You've got to for us, we have to reach certain milestones to get there. We are very heavy under 25 user base. And then, all of my entire board is under the age of 40 and we're all female. And I'd say we really have our board and our investors reflect the company that we're building. And I would have anticipated that, but it really has come true. And so those are two examples, I think, of where impact we've seen with our community and with our board.
And Sean, the representation and role models, that's something that you talk a bit about for Arternal as well. I'm not sure you spoke on this call today, so I'd like to give you an opportunity. You talk often about people who are in an MFA program, they're in art school, but they're not necessarily going to have a successful career themselves as an artist, and you're trying to help them see how they could still work in the space and be a gallery owner, serve the other artists who are in their cohort. Because to me, that's another example of a kind of impact that an investor might not ask about in advance, but it's something that you are finding happening in your work. Can you just describe that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Because, I saw through, just understanding the industry, one of the dealers who's a client of ours, David Kordansky, he's a prominent dealer now. He's based in LA. I got to understand like how he rose. And I was just like, oh, this is an interesting story that he actually had an understanding that, hey, I'm okay, but my friends, my circle, like they're really dope. Right. And so I was like, we need to be able to like make that an actual option for these MFA students who, again, it's hard to make it as an artist. Like it's incredibly difficult. And we always know that term starving artists exists, but how do you put more opportunities and give them optionality as they're going through their programming? And our focus is by providing better tools, number one, through Arternal, and then giving them the ability. And we hope to have programming where Arternal becomes a part of the curriculum and helping people understand how to do other business in the art. If you feel like, hey, there's probably another laneway, but the problem that they're facing is it's like, just focus on your art. And then you get out, you have this MFA and you're like, okay, I'm actually not going to make it. Well, what were the tools that you were given along the way that provided that optionality? And we're hoping that we can provide that sort of impact.
That's fantastic. So Lori, I think we've reached our time today, so I'm going to turn it back to you, but I really appreciate this opportunity again to bring the creative economy to your audience. And a big thank you to Pri and Patrick and Sean. I can't imagine three better entrepreneurs to show the breadth and the depth of what's happening in the creative economy and why impact capital is so important to see this work grow and continue.
Yes, thank you all. And thank you, Laura, again, for being such an excellent moderator and co-producer of these programs. For those of you who missed any part of the webinar, for all of you who'd like to watch it again, I'll be sending you a link and password to restream the program, as well as the chat and the Q&A. For many of you, this will be an email that comes from me using Eventbrite. Our premium members know that they'll get the email directly from me. Next week, I put this link in the chat. Our webinar series welcomes the founder and CEO of Leapfrog Investments, Andy Cooper, for a program entitled Insights from Impact's Premier Investment Fund. And then the following week, we have another fireside chat, this one with Eva Yazari of Beyond Capital Fund, for a program focused on emerging markets, impact investing. Just make sure you keep checking the calendar on our website and certainly subscribe to our newsletter. We got a lot of important updates and announcements coming in the next in days and weeks. So I heartily recommend you do that. As I mentioned, we are about to launch next month a new platform for impact entrepreneurs' work and for our global network. It features an online magazine that focuses on innovations in finance that advance the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And we recently announced our call for submissions for the magazine. And as I noted earlier, creative economy is one of the key issue areas that we'll be regularly publishing content around. So I shared in the link the link for more information. And again, I want to thank our moderator, Laura, for helping to produce the program and for being our moderator, and Pri, Sean, and Patrick. Thank you very much for the generosity of your time and for your contributions, not only to this discussion, but to the creative economy in general. Thank you so much.
Happy to see
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.
And thank you all for joining us. Take care, stay safe. Hope to see some or all of you next week for the next webinar. So long.